When a woman matures, she gains a kind of power that doesn't need to be advertised, justified, or explained. But with that power comes the wisdom to protect certain truths, not because she's hiding, but because she understands that some things lose value the moment they're exposed to the wrong people. Today, we're talking about the things older women should keep to themselves, not to manipulate anyone, but to guard their peace and avoid giving to people who haven't earned access. When a woman grows older, she starts understanding the value of guarding her emotional triggers, not because she is hiding anything out of fear, but because she has learned through experience that not everyone is trustworthy, not everyone is gentle, and not everyone deserves access to the deepest parts of her inner world. She knows that emotional triggers are not just reactions. They are the marks of her history, shaped by the moments that made her stronger, the challenges that forced her to grow, and the wounds she had to learn to close on her own. When she was younger, she may have shared these triggers freely, hoping someone would understand her, support her, or at least care enough to handle her with sensitivity. But age teaches her that not everyone who listens actually hears, and not everyone who sees her pain has the intention to protect it. Some people use vulnerabilities as leverage, some use them as entertainment, some simply dismiss them. So, with maturity comes a gentle, quiet discipline. She starts becoming selective about who gets to see the parts of her that are still tender. She observes people before opening up. She watches how they treat others, how they speak about people who trusted them, how they handle conflict, how they react when they don't get their way. She has learned that emotional safety is built, not assumed, and that you cannot hand someone a map to your weak spots unless they have proven themselves worthy of that trust. She also knows that her triggers are her responsibility, not anyone else's, and instead of expecting the world to walk on eggshells around her pain, she works on mastering her responses, calming her nervous system, and choosing who gets close enough to influence her emotional state. She becomes more grounded, more self-aware, more intentional with her silence. She understands that revealing your triggers to the wrong person can invite manipulation, disrespect, or unnecessary conflict, and she refuses to give anyone that kind of power. She has learned that the people who genuinely care will take the time to understand her without her needing to hand them a manual. They will observe her energy, notice her shifts, respect her boundaries, and adapt naturally. She no longer explains herself repeatedly to people who are committed to misunderstanding her. She no longer shares her deepest feelings with people who haven't earned her trust. She no longer exposes her heart to those who think vulnerability is a weakness. She guards certain emotional truths the same way she guards her peace, not out of secrecy, but out of wisdom. She has lived long enough to know that the world is filled with people who want access without accountability, closeness without responsibility, and intimacy without respect. She doesn't judge them, but she doesn't allow them in either. She becomes emotionally private, not emotionally cold. She loves deeply, but selectively. She expresses herself fully, but only with those who move with care. She gives her softness, but not to everyone. She understands that emotional triggers are the fingerprints of her past, and sharing them should be a privilege, not a default. She protects her emotional world because she has rebuilt it piece by piece, and she refuses to let anyone walk through it carelessly now that she finally understands the strength in staying private, the power in keeping certain things sacred, and the freedom that comes from choosing what remains unseen. When a woman matures, she begins to understand the quiet power of protecting her future plans, not because she is secretive or guarded, but because she has learned that the more she shares prematurely, the more room she gives for doubt, interference, and unnecessary noise. She has lived long enough to see how easily other people's opinions can derail her focus, how a single careless comment can drain her motivation, and how opening her plans to the wrong audience can invite envy, criticism, or subtle discouragement that chips away at her confidence. She knows that people often respond not from support, but from their own fears, limitations, and insecurities, and she refuses to let someone else's small thinking shrink her vision. So she holds her plans close, letting them grow quietly like seeds protected beneath the soil, safe from harsh winds and unkind weather. She understands that some dreams only survive in silence, nurtured with patience and persistence away from the eyes of those who don't understand them. She has seen how speaking too soon can make others feel entitled to comment, advise, correct, or even sabotage what she is building, sometimes without even realizing they are doing it. She knows that the moment you share your plans, they stop being fully yours, and she is no longer willing to hand over that control. She has learned that peace comes from privacy, and privacy creates progress. She recognizes that her energy is sacred, and any plan she pours that energy into deserves protection until it is strong enough to stand on its own. She moves differently now, more intentionally, more carefully, more selectively. She no longer needs validation for every idea that comes to her. She no longer seeks approval before taking a step forward. She no longer allows people's doubts to infect her direction. Instead, she trusts her intuition, her experience, and the wisdom she gained from past mistakes where she shared too much too soon. She knows that not every person who smiles is rooting for her, and not every ear that listens is loyal. She knows that some people celebrate publicly, but secretly hope she doesn't rise too far above them. She knows that others offer advice not to help, but to control. And she knows that many simply cannot see the vision she sees because it wasn't given to them. With age, she develops the strength to move in silence, letting her results speak when the time is right. She becomes comfortable with being misunderstood while she works quietly behind the scenes. She becomes confident in her ability to execute without needing a cheering section. She becomes secure in not explaining herself because she understands that growth does not require an audience. She stops giving people updates who haven't earned the right to know the direction of her life. She stops opening the door to those who only show up out of curiosity, not support. She stops sharing details with anyone who has proven they cannot hold information with respect. She focuses instead on building, refining, and aligning her actions with her purpose. She stays committed to her path, knowing that the most powerful moves are often the ones made in silence. Her plans become her private sanctuary, a space untouched by negativity, doubt, or entitlement. She protects them because she knows their value. She nurtures them because she feels their potential. She keeps them hidden because she understands that the world cannot ruin what it cannot see. When a woman has lived long enough to understand herself deeply, she realizes that her personal growth is something sacred, something that doesn't need to be broadcast, justified, or proven to anyone. She stops announcing every step of her healing, every shift in her mindset, and every transformation happening inside her because she knows that real growth isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't something you post for applause. It is something you work on quietly, consistently, and privately. She has learned from experience that the moment you share your healing journey with the wrong people, you invite judgment, comparison, and even subtle sabotage. Some people pretend to root for you while secretly hoping you stay the same because your evolution threatens the comfort they have always felt keeping you small. Others minimize your progress, telling you that you're overreacting, overthinking, or expecting too much. She recognizes that sharing her growth with people who haven't done their own work only leads to misunderstanding because they cannot comprehend a level of self-awareness they haven't reached yet. She protects her healing because it is delicate, like a fresh wound that needs quiet space to close. She works on herself privately because she knows that growth requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires a safe environment, not a public stage. She might be letting go of old habits, breaking trauma patterns, releasing toxic relationships, or learning to love herself in a deeper way. But she isn't announcing it because she has learned the hard way that when you grow out loud, people feel entitled to give opinions you didn't ask for. She prefers to evolve in silence now, letting her actions shift naturally instead of explaining her intentions. She no longer explains why she doesn't tolerate certain behaviors anymore. She no longer justifies why she needs space why she sets boundaries, or why she walks away. She understands that growth is a personal responsibility, not a performance. She keeps her self-improvement work private to protect its purity. She knows that healing requires patience and softness, not external pressure or commentary. So she journals quietly, reflects deeply, forgives slowly, and unpacks her experiences without an audience. She finds strength in solitude because it allows her to uncover truths that once scared her. She rewrites her story at her own pace, away from noise, away from expectations, away from opinions. People around her may notice changes. They may see her becoming calmer, stronger, more grounded, more direct, less reactive, more intentional, but they won't know how much work it took to get there because she doesn't feel the need to share the battles she fought internally. She is no longer interested in convincing others of her growth. She is only interested in experiencing it. She doesn't reveal the book she's reading, the therapy she's doing, the boundaries she's learning to enforce, or the old wounds she is finally closing, not because she is hiding, but because she is protecting. She understands that growth is like a flame. In the wrong environment, it can be blown out before it ever becomes strong enough to burn on its own. So she shelters it, she feeds it, she tends to it quietly until it becomes a steady fire she no longer has to defend. And when her growth finally shows, when her confidence rises, when her peace deepens, when her energy shifts, people will think it happened suddenly. They won't know how many silent nights she spent rebuilding herself. They won't know how many layers she peeled back alone. They won't know the pain she transformed into wisdom because she chose to keep that journey sacred. She grows privately because she knows that the most powerful transformations are the ones nurtured away from the world's eyes, protected until they are strong enough to shape her life from the inside out. When a woman reaches a certain stage of life, she begins to understand the importance of protecting the challenges within her relationships, not because she is pretending everything is perfect, but because she has lived long enough to know that outside opinions can do more damage than the actual problem itself. She has experienced how quickly people judge what they do not understand, how easily small issues become magnified when exposed to the wrong audience, and how some individuals take quiet satisfaction in seeing cracks in something meaningful. She realizes that relationships, whether romantic, family, or friendships, require protection from unnecessary voices, especially from those who carry their own biases, unresolved wounds, or hidden agendas. She learns that the safest place for her relationship challenges is within the relationship itself, handled with maturity, patience, and emotional intelligence, instead of being scattered among people who may not have her best interests at heart. She understands that privacy is not secrecy, it is preservation. It is choosing to keep sacred what she values because she has watched too many connections fall apart under the weight of public commentary. As she matures, she becomes more selective about who she invites into her emotional space. She no longer vents to just anyone because she knows that some people listen only to judge, others listen to compare, and some listen simply to gather information for later. She protects her relationship from the kind of scrutiny that can distort her perspective, feeding frustration instead of resolution. She knows that airing out every argument or disappointment can create resentment where there wasn't any, especially when the people she confided in hold on to the pain long after the issue has been resolved. She realizes that relationships grow best in an environment of loyalty, respect, and understanding, not in a spotlight where every flaw becomes a spectacle. She chooses instead to communicate directly with the person involved, to address misunderstandings at their source, and to work through conflict with calmness and clarity rather than with impulsive reactions fueled by outside influence. She understands that she cannot control the opinions of others, but she can control who has access to the details of her life. She has lived through moments where sharing too much created more chaos than clarity, where the advice she received was based on someone else's fears rather than her own truth, and where outsiders complicated a situation that could have been resolved quietly and lovingly. With time, she becomes wiser about protecting the energy surrounding the relationships that matter. She stops giving outsiders the power to define her happiness. She stops allowing people to project their negativity onto her experiences. She stops inviting opinions from those who have not walked her path, lived her story, or carried the responsibilities she carries. She learns to sit with her feelings, to process her thoughts before speaking, and to separate temporary frustration from long-term truth. She knows that every relationship has its moments, its imperfections, its tests, and its seasons, and she refuses to let temporary challenges become permanent wounds because she exposed them to people who thrive on drama. She keeps certain things private because she finally understands that love, loyalty, and commitment grow stronger in environments free from outside pressure. She protects what she is building by choosing silence over spectacle, intention over impulse, and trust over temporary emotional relief. She becomes the guardian of her peace, and by doing so, she becomes the quiet strength that holds her relationships together with dignity and wisdom. With age comes clarity, and one of the clearest lessons an older woman learns is the need to keep her financial details private because she understands that money has a way of changing how people behave, how they treat her, and what they expect from her. She begins to see that the moment people know too much about her income, her savings, her investments, or even her struggles, they start forming opinions and assumptions that have nothing to do with reality. Some may feel entitled to her resources, others may compete with her, and some may even resent her. She learns that privacy protects her from manipulation, guilt, or financial pressure that often comes from people who believe she has more than she owes or less than she deserves. She understands that keeping her financial boundaries firm is essential for her independence, especially after witnessing how easily generosity can be taken advantage of when her financial situation becomes public knowledge. She no longer explains what she earns or how she spends because she realizes that financial decisions are personal and deeply tied to her values, priorities, and long-term goals. She stops sharing her money plans with people who do not contribute to her stability because she sees how quickly they try to influence her choices or judge her for making decisions they do not understand. She becomes wise enough to recognize that the people who ask the most questions about her finances are often the ones who offer the least support. She has watched relationships fall apart because of money, and she refuses to let financial transparency open the door to expectations or obligations that drain her emotionally or financially. She keeps her savings private because she never wants anyone to assume she can rescue them or fund their dreams while neglecting her own. She keeps her struggles private because she does not want pity, judgment, or unsolicited advice from people who do not walk in her shoes. She keeps her goals private because she knows that financial success grows faster in silence without interference from outsiders who may project fear or jealousy onto her plans. She has learned to move quietly, to invest quietly, to build quietly, believing that security feels better than attention. She manages her finances with intention, focusing on stability rather than impression, knowing that financial peace comes from discipline, not disclosure. She becomes mindful of how she shares, with whom she shares, and why she shares, realizing that financial privacy is not selfishness, but protection. She knows that her worth is not defined by what she owns, and her happiness is not dependent on who knows what she earns. She guards her financial life because she has earned every bit of her independence, and she refuses to let public exposure weaken her stability. She understands that money invites assumptions, assumptions create expectations, and expectations lead to pressure that she no longer allows into her life as she moves through the world with quiet confidence, steady discipline, and the wisdom to keep her financial reality protected from anyone who has not earned the right to know it.